What if everything you've been told about the second coming of Christ is missing the most important piece? Imagine for a moment that the story we've been taught of Christ returning in glory, descending from the heavens, with the sound of trumpets blaring. What if that story is not the whole story? What if there's a piece of the puzzle we've never considered, one that's been hidden from us for centuries? A piece of prophecy so ancient, so deeply rooted in history, it's been kept alive by those who walked away from the world's empires and stayed true to God's calling. Far from the golden gates of Jerusalem, high in the Ethiopian mountains, there's a belief that Christ's return will not come through Israel. No, it will come through Africa, through Ethiopia. A place many of us never thought to look. This isn't a fringe theory, a conspiracy, or some fantastical legend. This is a deeply held truth passed down through generations, kept safe in the heart of Africa, in the silence of monks, etched into the stones of churches, and whispered through rituals that have stood the test of time. But here's the real kicker. What if the Ark of the Covenant, the holiest artifact ever known to mankind, is already there, waiting for Christ's return? What if, just like the Israelites followed the Ark through the desert, God's presence traveled with it, and when it left Jerusalem, God left too? Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Isn't the Ark lost? Didn't it disappear centuries ago? But what if it wasn't lost at all? What if it's been waiting quietly in Ethiopia? And what if that ancient prophecy, long buried beneath centuries of silence, has been waiting for you to discover it? Stick with me, because in the next few minutes we're going to explore something that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the end times. It's a journey few have taken, but today I'm inviting you to join me as we go where only a few dare to look into the heart of Ethiopia, into the roots of an ancient faith that still holds the key to Christ's return. Let's begin where the story of Christ's return might be unfolding right now, not in the bustling streets of Jerusalem, but in the highlands of Africa. What if everything you've been told about the second coming of Christ is missing the most important piece? What if the prophecy we've all been waiting for has been hidden, not because it was lost, but because it was never meant to be discovered by us until now? When we talk about the return of Christ, most of us picture the familiar scene, the sky breaking open, the sound of trumpets, and Christ descending to rule from the throne in Jerusalem. It's a powerful image, one that has been passed down through generations. But what if I told you that there's another version of this prophecy, a version that's been preserved in the heart of Africa, in a place most of us never think about? Deep in the Ethiopian highlands, there's an ancient belief that Christ's return will not come through the temples of Israel. It won't be through the streets of Jerusalem or from a throne in the city where he once walked. No, this prophecy tells us that Christ will return through the mountains of Ethiopia, a place where heaven will touch earth again, but not in the way we've always imagined. This isn't some fringe theory or a whispered secret among outsiders. This is a belief that has been carried on for centuries, etched into the very soul of Ethiopian culture. It's been passed down through the bloodlines of kings, guarded by monks, and preserved in the sacred rituals of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And at the heart of it all is the Ark of the Covenant, that sacred symbol of God's presence on earth. The Ark that, according to Ethiopian tradition, was taken from Jerusalem centuries ago, not to be lost, but to be protected and preserved in Ethiopia for a divine purpose. Now, I know this might sound strange. Some of you may be thinking, how could this be? The Ark left Jerusalem and has been lost for generations. Isn't that just a myth? But what if the story is not what we think it is? What if the Ark wasn't lost at all, but hidden in plain sight? And what if its relocation wasn't just about moving an object, but about moving God's presence itself? You see, for centuries, Ethiopia has claimed that the Ark is with them. It's not just a part of their history, it's a living, breathing symbol of their connection to God. They believe the Ark is waiting right now in a small, hidden chapel, guarded by one man who has dedicated his life to protecting it. And if the ark is there, then that means something profound. The divine presence of God has moved away from the temples of Israel, and it's now resting in Ethiopia, a place where many have never thought to look. This isn't just a historical fact, it's a prophecy that for some reason has been forgotten by much of the world, but Ethiopia has never forgotten. And as we dive deeper into this, I want you to think about one thing. What if the second coming of Christ is not something we're waiting for in the future, but something that's already been set in motion in a place we've overlooked for centuries? Now, let's begin to explore why this belief in Ethiopia's role in the second coming is not just ancient history, but something that speaks to us today. Because the truth buried in Ethiopia's past may hold the key to understanding how God's divine plan is unfolding right now. The Ark of the Covenant, to many it's just a piece of ancient history, a symbol of God's presence on earth, lost to time and legend. But what if I told you that the Ark wasn't lost at all? What if it was moved from Jerusalem to a place far from the golden gates of Israel into the heart of Africa? And what if this act of relocation wasn't just about transporting an object, but about a spiritual shift that would change the course of history? Let's take a moment to think about what the ark really represents. In the Bible, the ark was the sacred container that held the stone tablets given to Moses on Mount Sinai, the very law of God. It was said to be the seat of God's presence, His throne on earth. Wherever the ark went, God's blessing and power followed. It was carried into battle by the Israelites, bringing them victory. It was there in the tabernacle, in the Holy of Holies, and in the Temple of Solomon. It was the symbol of God's covenant with His people. But then something happened. The ark disappeared from the pages of history. The last known location was the temple in Jerusalem, and after the Babylonian invasion, it was never seen again. For centuries, people have speculated, was it destroyed, hidden away, or was it simply lost to time? Ethiopians believe they have the answer. According to their ancient tradition, the ark was not lost, it was taken, and it wasn't taken to just any place. It was taken to Ethiopia, hidden away in the city of Aksum, far from the hustle and bustle of Jerusalem, far from the great empires of the world. This wasn't a random move. It was a divine relocation. The story goes like this. Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, went to Jerusalem to meet his father and returned with something far more precious than any gift or treasure. He returned with the Ark of the Covenant. Some versions of the story say that Solomon gave it to Menelik willingly, while others suggest that it was taken without his blessing. Regardless of how it happened, the ark was no longer in Israel, it was in Ethiopia, safe and protected. Imagine that for a moment. The most sacred object in all of Hebrew tradition, the very seat of God's presence on earth, taken from Israel and brought to Ethiopia. This wasn't just about moving a box. This was about God moving His presence. The ark wasn't lost, it was hidden, placed in a place where it would be guarded by those who would protect it with reverence, not exploit it for power. For centuries, Ethiopians have believed that the ark remains with them, safely guarded in the Church of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum. They believe it is waiting not just as a relic of the past, but as a symbol of God's ongoing covenant with His people. And here's the powerful part. If the ark is truly in Ethiopia, that means God's presence moved with it. The spiritual center of the world, the place where heaven touched earth, didn't stay in Jerusalem, it moved to Ethiopia. Now, you might be asking, what does this mean for us today? What does this ancient story have to do with our lives and with the return of Christ? Here's the lesson. The relocation of the ark wasn't just a physical move, it was a spiritual one. It was a reminder that God's presence isn't confined to one place, one nation, or one people. It shows us that God's work in the world isn't limited to what we can see or understand. Just because something has been hidden doesn't mean it's been abandoned. Just because it's out of our sight doesn't mean it's not still working. Ethiopia, in its humility, has protected the ark not for fame or glory, but for the sake of the divine presence that they believe is still with them. And as we look at the ark's relocation, we're reminded that God's presence is still moving today. It's not confined to our expectations or our comfort zones. God's plans are bigger than we can imagine, and sometimes they unfold in places we least expect. So, what does this mean for us? It means that just because we can't see God's work in our lives doesn't mean He's absent. Sometimes God's presence is hidden, but it's always there, quietly working, preparing for the moment when He will reveal His plans in full. Now, let's move on and explore how Ethiopia's belief in the Ark and its divine relocation shapes their understanding of Zion. If the Ark is there, then Zion, the spiritual heart of God's people, may not be where we think it is. Let's dig deeper into this mystery, because it has profound implications for how we view God's kingdom, both now and in the days to come. Menelik I, a name that carries deep significance in the history of Ethiopia. To many, he is more than just a king. He is the fulfillment of prophecy, a living bridge between two worlds, the ancient kingdom of Israel and the heart of Africa. But to understand why Menelik is so important, we need to take a step back and look at the profound meaning behind his birth and his destiny. It all began with the Queen of Sheba, a woman of great wisdom, wealth, and influence. She traveled to Jerusalem to meet King Solomon, the wisest man to ever live. But her journey wasn't just about diplomacy or trade. She came seeking something much deeper, truth. She had heard of Solomon's wisdom, but she wanted to see it for herself. What she found, however, was more than just knowledge. She found a covenant, an eternal bond between two nations, one that would alter the course of history. From this union between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, Menelik I was born. He was not just any child. He was the product of divine prophecy, the son of a king. But more importantly, he was the heir to a covenant that was far bigger than any throne. His very birth marked the beginning of a new chapter for Ethiopia, a chapter that tied the fate of a kingdom to the ancient promises made to Israel. As Menelik grew, he became more than just a figurehead. He was a man of purpose, chosen for a divine mission. When he came of age, he returned to Jerusalem, but his return wasn't just ceremonial, it was the fulfillment of a promise. He brought with him something that would forever change Ethiopia's spiritual landscape, the Ark of the Covenant. Now you might be wondering, how did this come to pass? How did a young man, a child of two royal lineages, end up with the holiest artifact of the Hebrew people? Some traditions say that Solomon willingly gave the ark to Menelik as a gesture of goodwill, recognizing that the ark had found a new home in the heart of Ethiopia. Other accounts suggest that Menelik took the ark without Solomon's blessing, a powerful symbol of the divine right and calling that flowed through his veins. Regardless of how it happened, what matters is this: Menelik I took the ark back to Ethiopia, and in doing so, he became the living fulfillment of prophecy. The ark, which had once represented the presence of God in Jerusalem, was now in Ethiopia, a land where the covenant between God and his people would continue to flourish. It wasn't just a symbolic act, it was a divine relocation, a shift in the very spiritual geography of the world. God's presence, symbolized by the ark, had moved from one land to another, from the hills of Israel to the mountains of Ethiopia. This wasn't just about the physical ark. It was about what the ark represented: God's presence on earth, his covenant with his people, and his promise of redemption. By taking the ark, Menelik I didn't just inherit a throne, he inherited a mission. He became the guardian of a covenant, one that would bind the people of Ethiopia to God in a way that would last for millennia. The ark's relocation wasn't just a historical event, it was a spiritual turning point, a moment when God's presence shifted and a new chapter in prophecy began to unfold. For Ethiopians, Menelik I is more than just a king. He is the fulfillment of a promise that stretches back to the days of Solomon, a living testament to the enduring covenant between God and his people. And the ark, hidden away in Ethiopia, remains a symbol of that promise. A promise that has not been forgotten, but guarded and honored for generations. So, What can we learn from Menelik I and his role in this divine story? The lesson here is simple but profound. God's plans are often bigger than we can see. Menelik I didn't just inherit a throne, he inherited a purpose, a divine calling that shaped the destiny of an entire nation. His actions remind us that sometimes the path we're on isn't just about what we inherit, but about what we're called to carry forward. Menelik carried the ark, and in doing so, he carried the presence of God with him, not for his own glory, but for the glory of the divine plan that stretched beyond his lifetime. As we continue this journey, I want you to think about your own life. What have you inherited? What divine purpose are you carrying forward? Like Menelik, we too are called to be stewards of God's promises, carrying his presence into the world and sharing his message with others. Now, let's move forward and explore how Ethiopia's claim to Zion and its unique role in prophecy is tied to Menelik's legacy. If the ark is truly in Ethiopia, then Zion, the place where God chooses to dwell, may not be where we've always thought it was. Let's dive into this mystery and uncover the deeper truth about Ethiopia's connection to Zion. When we think of Zion, our minds often drift to the hills of Jerusalem, to the city where Christ walked and where the temple once stood. We envision Zion as a place of power, a place of history, a place of sacred significance. But what if I told you that Zion, in a deeper, more profound sense, is not confined to one geographical location? What if I told you that Ethiopia, a land far from the bustling streets of Jerusalem, has its own claim to Zion, a claim that stretches back to the days of Menelik I and one that is alive and well today? You see, in Ethiopia, Zion is not just a hill in Israel, it is a spiritual concept. It's the place where God chooses to dwell, not bound by the walls of a city or the borders of a nation, but within the hearts of his people. And according to Ethiopian tradition, Zion is alive and present in Ethiopia, where the Ark of the Covenant has been guarded for over 3,000 years. Ethiopia's claim to Zion is not just about a geographical location, it's about the very presence of God. In Ethiopian belief, Zion isn't a place that can be destroyed or taken away by armies or empires. It's a living, breathing reality, deeply woven into the nation's identity, their history, and their faith. When the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia, it wasn't just moved from one place to another. It was a divine relocation, a shift in the spiritual geography of the world. God's presence, symbolized by the ark, had moved from Jerusalem to Ethiopia, and in doing so, Ethiopia became the new spiritual heart of God's people. This belief is not just theoretical, it's lived out in the daily lives of Ethiopians. Their religious practices, their festivals, and their traditions are all deeply tied to this understanding of Zion. For instance, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church still observes ancient Hebrew traditions, such as following kosher dietary laws and celebrating Old Testament festivals like Timkat, the Ethiopian version of the Feast of Epiphany. These practices are not mere rituals, they are a living connection to the covenant God made with Israel, a covenant that Ethiopians believe they continue to honor and fulfill. But beyond the rituals and the traditions, the deeper lesson here is that Ethiopia's claim to Zion is about God's faithfulness to his promises. The move of the ark wasn't just about preserving a relic of the past, it was about God continuing his work in the world through a nation that would protect and honor his presence. And what does that mean for us today? It means that God's promises aren't limited to one people or one place. Just because something has been hidden or out of our sight doesn't mean it's been abandoned. Ethiopia's claim to Zion teaches us that God is present wherever his people honor him, wherever his covenant is upheld. It's a reminder that God doesn't operate on our timelines or according to our expectations. He's bigger than any one place, any one nation, and any one people. His presence is wherever he chooses to dwell, and he chooses to dwell with those who honor him. The story of Ethiopia's Zion also teaches us something else, the importance of endurance. Ethiopia is a nation that has withstood centuries of hardship, colonialism, war, famine, and exile. Yet through it all, they've held on to their faith, never forgetting the promises God made to them, And in the face of adversity, Ethiopia hasn't just survived, they've thrived. Their faith has endured, and their connection to God's covenant remains unshaken. For us, this is a powerful lesson. It teaches us that no matter the challenges we face, God's promises are still with us. We may not always see or understand His plans, but we can trust that He is faithful to His word. Just like Ethiopia, we are called to endure, to hold on to our faith, and to trust that God is with us even when we can't see His presence in the way we expect. As we move on, I want you to reflect on this. Where is your Zion? Where do you experience God's presence in your life? It may not be in the places we expect or the ways we imagine, but if we are faithful, we will find that God's Zion is wherever He chooses to dwell in our hearts, in our homes, and in the communities we build together. Now let's take this one step further. If Ethiopia's claim to Zion is so deeply rooted in the relocation of the Ark, what does that mean for us today? What does it mean for how we understand the return of Christ? Let's explore that deeper as we move into the next part of our journey, where we'll look at how Ethiopia's spiritual geography ties into the greater story of prophecy and the end times. The idea of a covenant is at the very heart of God's relationship with His people. In the Bible, God made covenants with individuals and nations, promises that were unbreakable, lasting forever. The covenant with Noah, with Abraham, with David, they were not just agreements written on paper. They were promises sealed by God Himself, a commitment that transcended generations. But what happens when a covenant is passed down not just through words, but through generations of faith, through actions that honor and protect that covenant? What happens when a nation takes God's covenant not as a historical event, but as a living connection, a continuous bond? This is where Ethiopia's story becomes so powerful. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church doesn't just see itself as a branch of Christianity, it sees itself as a continuation of the covenant between God and His people. That covenant didn't end with the fall of Jerusalem or the destruction of the temple. It didn't end when the Ark left Israel. No, Ethiopia believes that the covenant lives on, passed down through the bloodlines of their kings and the faith of their people. From the moment Menelik I brought the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia, the nation embraced this sacred responsibility, not just as a symbol, but as a way of life. The Ark became a living connection to God, a sign that God's presence was with them and His promises were still alive. For Ethiopians, the Ark wasn't a relic or a historical artifact. It was a living reality, a divine connection that shaped their faith and their identity. Ethiopians still live with this covenant today. It's reflected in their religious practices, their festivals, their laws. For example, they observe dietary laws similar to the kosher laws in the Old Testament, celebrating the same festivals that have been practiced for centuries. But it's not just about rituals and traditions. It's about the heart of the covenant, the relationship with God that has been passed down through generations. Consider the festival of Timkat, which celebrates the baptism of Christ. It's one of the most important holidays in Ethiopia. And it's not just about remembering a historical event, it's about renewing the covenant with God, embracing His presence, and reaffirming the promises made long ago. During this festival, Ethiopians carry replicas of the Ark in colorful processions as a reminder that the Ark is not lost, but still with them, still guiding them, still part of their living connection with God. This is where the lesson comes in for us today. The enduring covenant that Ethiopia celebrates teaches us that God's promises are not just for a time or a season, they are forever. The covenant between God and His people doesn't end with one generation. It's passed down through faith, through actions, through lives that are lived in honor of that promise. Just as Ethiopia honors the Ark as a living connection to God, we too are called to live out the covenant in our own lives. We're called to carry God's presence with us, to live in a way that reflects His promises, not just in the good times, but in the tough times too. The question I want to leave with you is this: How are you living out the covenant in your life today? Are you carrying God's presence with you, not just as a memory of something that happened long ago, but as a living, breathing reality that shapes how you live, how you love, how you serve? God's promises are still alive, still powerful, and still for us today. But it's up to us to embrace them, to carry them forward, just like Ethiopia has done for centuries. And just as the covenant is alive and well in Ethiopia, it's still unfolding in our world today. God's plan is bigger than we can imagine. And Ethiopia's example reminds us that He's still moving, still working, and still fulfilling His promises. So, as we continue to explore Ethiopia's role in God's plan, let's keep this in mind. The covenant isn't just history, it's a living connection that we are all invited to be a part of. Now, as we move on, let's take a closer look at how Ethiopia's spiritual practices and their deep connection to the covenant shape their understanding of God's timeline. If the covenant is alive, then God's divine plan is still unfolding, and Ethiopia holds a key to understanding the times we're living in. Let's dive deeper into the role of Ethiopia's unique calendar and how it aligns with God's appointed times and what that means for us today. When we think about time, we often think in terms of the calendar we follow every day, the Gregorian calendar, the one most of the world uses. We mark our days, months, and years based on the movement of the sun, the seasons, and the passage of time. But what if there was another way to look at time? A way that wasn't bound by the calendars of empires, but by something much deeper, a rhythm that flows from God's own design. In Ethiopia, time isn't just measured by the ticking of the clock or the flip of the calendar pages. Their calendar is something entirely unique, one that runs 7 to 8 years behind the Western Gregorian system. At first glance, this might seem like a mere historical quirk, a simple difference in how we keep track of days. But in Ethiopia, this is far more than just a clerical detail. It's a spiritual stand. It's a reflection of their belief that God's timing doesn't always align with the world's systems. The Ethiopian calendar, rooted in ancient traditions and interpretations of Scripture, doesn't just count time, it marks the rhythm of the divine. Each year is associated with a saint, and every day holds its own significance, a day set apart for prayer and reflection. And every 50 years, Ethiopia celebrates a Jubilee, a sacred time of release, renewal, and divine alignment. This isn't just a festival, it's a deep spiritual moment when heaven and earth are in sync, when God's plan for the world unfolds in a way that transcends human understanding. But why does this matter? Why does Ethiopia's unique understanding of time matter to us today? The answer lies in how they view God's appointed times. The Ethiopians believe that God doesn't operate on Caesar's clock. His timing isn't determined by the political forces of the world or by the calendar that was created centuries ago. Instead, His divine timing is rooted in something much older, something that connects the past, present, and future in a way that's beyond our comprehension. Imagine for a moment that time isn't just a straight line stretching from one year to the next. Imagine that time is a circle, a sacred rhythm that echoes through the ages. When Ethiopians observe their calendar, they're not just tracking the passage of days, they're marking God's divine rhythm, the seasons He has set in motion for the world to follow. Each year is another beat in the great song of history, another moment of alignment with His divine will. And here's where it gets really fascinating. Many Ethiopian theologians believe that Christ's return will align with one of these divine moments on their calendar, a moment that doesn't follow the Western timeline, but rather follows the rhythm of God's appointed times. This means that the second coming of Christ for Ethiopia might not align with the Gregorian calendar's Easter. Instead, it might happen in alignment with the Ethiopian Jubilee, a sacred time when heaven and earth meet in a cosmic dance. What does that mean for us today? It means that God's timing is not bound by our human systems. It means that while we may be looking at our calendars and wondering when Christ will return, Ethiopia is looking at their calendar and seeing something different. They are living in a rhythm that aligns with God's divine purposes, a rhythm that's been preserved for centuries and speaks to a deeper understanding of time. The lesson here is simple yet profound. God's timing is perfect. We may not always understand it. We may want to fit it into our own plans and schedules, but God doesn't work on our timeline. His time is sacred. His time is purposeful. And just as the Ethiopian calendar reminds us of His divine rhythm, it calls us to trust that His plan is unfolding exactly as He has intended. Now, as we move on, I want you to think about this. How often do we rush through life trying to fit God's timing into our own? What if we, like Ethiopia, learned to live in rhythm with God's divine purpose, trusting that He is never late and never early, but always right on time? Let's dive deeper into this divine mystery. If Ethiopia's understanding of time is connected to God's appointed seasons, then what does that mean for us? What role does suffering and endurance play in God's ultimate plan? In the next part, we'll explore how Ethiopia's journey through hardship has prepared them for something much greater, something that goes beyond time and touches eternity. There's something about suffering that we tend to shy away from, isn't there? In our world, we do everything we can to avoid pain, to dodge difficulty, and to create a life where things are comfortable and predictable. But what if I told you that in God's economy, suffering isn't the end of the story? What if it's actually the beginning of something far greater? Ethiopia's story, in many ways, is a testament to this profound truth. For centuries, Ethiopia has endured hardship. From the brutalities of colonization to the ravages of war and famine, the Ethiopian people have faced challenges that would break many others. But through it all, they have held on to something deeply precious, something that the rest of the world often overlooks: their faith. Their faith, in the midst of suffering, has remained steadfast, and in that faith, they have seen God's hand move in ways that speak directly to us today. Ethiopia's history of suffering has been much more than just a tragedy. It has been a refining fire, a purification of the soul. It has been a process by which God has prepared the nation, not for judgment, but for redemption. Just like gold is refined in fire, Ethiopia's faith has been tested and proven, and through that testing they have become a shining example of endurance, resilience, and divine preparation. Now, I know this may be hard for some of us to grasp. Suffering is never easy. It never feels good in the moment. But the truth is, God often uses our suffering to prepare us for the glory that is yet to come. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans 8:18, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." There is a glory that comes on the other side of suffering, a glory that cannot be obtained any other way. Take a moment to think about your own life. Are there areas where you've faced pain, loss, or difficulty? Maybe it's in your relationships, your health, or your work. Whatever the challenge may be, consider this: God isn't absent in your suffering. He is using it to prepare you for something greater. Just as Ethiopia has endured and come out stronger, so too will you. The Ethiopian people don't see their suffering as evidence of God's absence. They see it as evidence of His preparation. They know that through hardship, God is purifying them, shaping them, and preparing them for something far beyond what they can see in the moment. They hold on to the hope that God's plans are always bigger than their pain. And this is the lesson for us. When we suffer, we are not abandoned. We are being prepared. We are being shaped into vessels that can carry God's glory into the world. In the book of James, we are told to count it all joy when we face trials, because the testing of our faith produces perseverance. It's a beautiful paradox: joy in the midst of pain. Not because the pain feels good, but because we know that it's shaping us into something better. And this is what Ethiopia teaches us. Through centuries of suffering, Ethiopia has not been destroyed, they have been refined. They have been prepared for something greater, something glorious, something eternal. So what does that mean for us? It means that our suffering is not wasted. It means that God uses even our hardest moments to prepare us for His glory. It's not easy, but it's worth it. We may not understand why we go through what we go through, but we can trust that God is using it to shape us into the people He's called us to be. Now, as we continue this journey, let's move from the idea of suffering as preparation to something even deeper. If Ethiopia's suffering has prepared them for glory, then what does that say about God's plan for the world? What does it say about the role of Ethiopia in the end times? Let's explore how God has not only used Ethiopia's history to prepare them for redemption, but how their enduring faith has positioned them to fulfill a divine purpose in the world. When we think about the return of Christ, we often picture Him descending from the sky, with the clouds parting and trumpets sounding. We imagine a dramatic, otherworldly event where the heavens open up and Christ, in all His glory, returns to rule on earth. This is the imagery that has been passed down through centuries, and it's deeply ingrained in our minds. But what if I told you that the return of Christ might not unfold in the way we've always imagined? What if Christ's return isn't from the sky, but from the soil? What if the place where He returns isn't some grand city with shining lights or a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, but from a humble mountain, from a land that has been prepared for His return in ways we've overlooked? This is the unique and powerful belief that Ethiopia holds. They believe that Christ's return will come through their land, not through the clouds, but through the very soil of Ethiopia, where God's presence has already been dwelling. It's a belief that flows from their deep connection to the Ark of the Covenant and their understanding of Zion, not as a distant place in Jerusalem, but as a living reality in Ethiopia. For Ethiopians, the return of Christ is not a distant event that will happen in the future. It is a divine homecoming, a reunion between Christ and the land where His presence has never truly left. You see, the idea that Christ will return from the soil rather than the sky is a powerful symbol. It speaks to the notion that Christ's kingdom isn't about grand displays of power or cosmic events. It's about the places where God's presence has remained, hidden yet steady, where His people have endured and kept the faith. Ethiopia, with its long history of suffering and faithfulness, believes that Christ will return to the place where His presence has always been guarded, protected, and honored. Think about the significance of soil for a moment. Soil is where things grow. It's where seeds are planted, where life begins. Soil is the foundation for life to sprout and flourish. In a way, Ethiopia's belief that Christ will return from the soil represents the idea that the foundation for His kingdom has already been laid there. The soil is rich with the prayers of the faithful, the endurance of generations, and the steadfast love of God's people. Christ's return, then, is not a dramatic event in the sky, but the fulfillment of something that has been quietly growing in the soil of Ethiopia for centuries. Now, I know this may seem like a dramatic departure from what we've been taught. We've always thought of Christ's return as a celestial event, something that will shake the heavens and earth. But think about this for a moment. Christ's first coming was humble. He was born in a manger in a small town to a poor family. His return, according to Ethiopia's belief, could be just as humble, just as rooted in the land, not in a grand spectacle. Christ's return may very well be an unexpected return to the places where His presence has been hidden and quietly protected, where His people have waited in faith. This idea challenges us to rethink what we expect from the return of Christ. It's not just about waiting for a cosmic event in the sky. It's about recognizing that Christ's presence is already here on the soil of the earth, in the hearts of His people, in the places where faith has been guarded and cultivated. The return of Christ could come in ways we least expect, through the places where God's presence has never been abandoned, where His people have kept the faith through all kinds of adversity. What does this mean for us today? It means that we need to look beyond our expectations of what Christ's return will look like. We need to recognize that Christ's kingdom is already here, growing in the soil of our hearts, in the soil of our communities, and in the places where God's people are faithful to His call. Just as Ethiopia has preserved the faith for centuries, we too are called to preserve God's presence in our lives, to keep the faith, and to live in anticipation of His return, not as an event in the sky, but as a reality on earth. So, as we look forward to Christ's return, let us remember that it may not come in the way we expect. It may come through the soil, through the places where God's presence has quietly and steadily been at work. Let's embrace that reality, knowing that God's timing is perfect and His plans are bigger than anything we can imagine. As we continue this journey, let's look deeper into Ethiopia's history and role in prophecy, and how their faith and endurance have prepared them for a divine purpose in the world. If Christ's return is coming through the soil, then what role does Ethiopia play in that divine plan? Let's explore that next. When we talk about the return of Christ, one of the most widely held beliefs is that the third temple will be built in Jerusalem. After all, prophecy seems to tell us that the temple will play a key role in the end times. For many, this idea has shaped our understanding of what the final days will look like. But what if the third temple isn't something we're still waiting to see built? What if it's already here? What if the temple, the holy place that we've all been waiting for, has already been constructed, not with bricks and stones, but with something even more sacred? This is where Ethiopia's story takes another profound turn. The belief that the third temple has already been built doesn't come from a modern construction project in Jerusalem, but from a deeply spiritual understanding rooted in Ethiopia's ancient faith and history. For Ethiopians, the temple isn't just a physical structure. It's a living, breathing place where God's presence has been honored and protected for centuries. The belief is that the true third temple isn't built with human hands, but rather carved into the very heart of the earth, hidden, but alive with divine significance. Let's consider Ethiopia's sacred rock-hewn churches in Lalibela. These aren't just beautiful structures carved into the mountainside. They are considered by many to be the embodiment of the third temple. Built in the 12th century, these churches were chiseled directly from solid rock, not with the tools of the modern world, but with faith and vision. Legend has it that these churches were constructed not by human hands alone, but with divine help. Some even say that angels worked through the night to build them. And while this might sound like a legend, the spiritual significance is undeniable. These churches were built as a sanctuary, a place where heaven and earth could meet even if the rest of the world had forgotten. Now think about this. What if these rock-hewn churches are the third temple that prophecy has been talking about all along? They may not be the temple we envision made of gold and stone sitting on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But in Ethiopia, these churches are seen as the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy, a living temple that has stood the test of time and faith. It's easy to think of a temple as a physical building, something grand and imposing. But in God's eyes, a temple is more than just a structure. It's a place where His presence dwells. And in Ethiopia, they believe that God's presence has never left them. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela serve as a symbol that the third temple isn't something that needs to be built in the future, but something that has already been established right where God's people are faithful and honoring Him. This doesn't mean that the temple in Jerusalem is unimportant. It has its own place in God's plan. But what Ethiopia teaches us is that the true temple is not confined to one location or to one people. The temple is wherever God's presence is honored, where His people live in faith, and where His divine will is fulfilled. And just as the Ethiopian people have kept the faith, they have built a living temple that stands as a testament to God's eternal presence. Now, this is where the lesson for us comes in. The question is not whether we will see a physical third temple built in Jerusalem, but whether we are living in alignment with God's will right now. Are we honoring God's presence in our lives, in our homes, in our communities? Just like Ethiopia has preserved the true essence of the temple, we are called to be living temples where God's Spirit can dwell and work through us. The mystery of the third temple is not about waiting for a building to be erected. It's about recognizing that the temple is already here, alive and working in us. God doesn't need a grand structure to dwell among His people. He is with us wherever we are, in the places where we honor Him, where we live out His commands, and where we share His love with the world. So, let's ask ourselves, are we prepared to be that temple? Are we ready to honor God with our lives, to be the place where His presence can dwell? Just as Ethiopia has preserved a living temple for centuries, we too are called to be living, breathing temples, places where God's glory shines through our actions, our faith, and our love. As we move forward, let's continue to explore what it means for us to live as temples of God in the world today. What does it look like to be a living temple in a world that often forgets the divine presence? Let's dive into that next. Because living as God's temple is not just about buildings, it's about how we live out His presence in everything we do. As we come to the end of this journey, I want to leave you with a thought that may change the way you look at the return of Christ. For so long, we've imagined Christ's return as a grand spectacle, a cosmic event, a world-shaking moment with trumpets blaring and the sky cracking open. We envision it as something that will happen out there, somewhere in the heavens. But what if it's not a spectacle at all? What if the return of Christ is not an event that will overwhelm us with awe and fear, but a homecoming? What if Christ is returning not as an outsider, but as one who is coming home? This is the belief that resonates deeply within Ethiopia's tradition, a belief that's tied to their unique understanding of Zion, the Ark of the Covenant, and their unshakable faith. For Ethiopians, Christ's return is not a dramatic, foreign invasion of the earth, but a return to the very soil where His presence has never left. It's a homecoming, a reunion between Christ and the land that has kept His promise alive for thousands of years. And as we consider this, I want us to remember that God doesn't just return to places of power and grandeur. He returns to the places where His presence has been quietly nurtured, where His covenant has been protected and upheld, often in the most humble and unexpected ways. Think about your own home. What does a homecoming feel like? It's not about a grand entrance or a showy display. It's about returning to the place where you belong, the place that has been waiting for you, the place where you are loved and accepted. Christ's return will be just like that. It won't be a spectacle to impress the world. It will be a return to the hearts of those who have faithfully awaited Him. It will be a reunion with those who have kept His promises alive, even in the midst of suffering, hardship, and endurance. Just like Ethiopia has preserved the divine presence through generations of faith, so too are we called to preserve Christ's presence in our lives. We may not know the day or the hour, but we know this: Christ is returning, and when He does, it won't be with fanfare or force. It will be with the love and intimacy of a homecoming, a return to the hearts of those who have kept the faith, who have lived according to His will, who have made room for Him in their hearts. The return of Christ is not something to fear, it's something to prepare for. We don't have to wait for some grand event in the sky. We can prepare for His return by living out His presence in our lives today. Christ is already here in our hearts, in our homes, in the places where His people gather in faith. And as we wait for His ultimate return, we are called to live as a reflection of that coming glory. So, as you think about the return of Christ, remember that it's not about waiting for a spectacle, it's about waiting for a homecoming. It's about preparing our hearts, our homes, and our lives to be places where His presence can dwell. Just as Ethiopia has been faithfully waiting for Christ's return through the Ark and their enduring covenant, we too are called to prepare ourselves for the return of our Savior. And as we go about our days, let's ask ourselves, how are we preparing for Christ's return? Are we living as His temple, as His people, ready to welcome Him home? Because when He returns, it won't be about the sky splitting open or the world shaking. It will be about the quiet, beautiful moment when Christ comes home to those who have been waiting for Him, living in His presence every day. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. As we await Christ's return, may we always remember that it's not about waiting for a spectacle, it's about preparing for a homecoming.